My guest today, Steve Weaver, has gone through a lifetime of undiagnosed, untreated dyslexia. He was recently diagnosed late in life, and we dive into how he has overcome fear, overcome his addiction to marijuana, and how he has gotten through and survived and even thrived now. We'll tap into what he's doing now as a comedian, actor, and other things that he is starting late in his life.
Hello, dreamers. Welcome to the Late Starters Club, giving you the inspiration, mindset, and tools you need to start something midlife and beyond. Remember, it's never too late to follow your dreams. Hello, Late Starters. It's your host, Andrea Vall. And today I am joined by one of my favorite types of guests, a fellow comedian. so please welcome Steve Weaver. He is a retired IT professional. He is a 38-year husband, father of three, grandfather of one, undiagnosed dyslexic student, and he has recovered from marijuana addiction. Graduated summa cum laude, Army veteran, and aspiring actor and comedian. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be a part of your show.
Yeah, super awesome. I connected with Steve here in the Denver comedy scene and heard his story and was like, "Oh, you got to come in the show and kind of talk about the things that you have been through and overcome later in life and discovered later in life." And I think one of the most major things was discovering you're dyslexic. I can't even say it. Dyslexic. Is that right? When did you discover that?
I was 59 years old when I found
Wow.
out that I was dyslexic. I mean, the symptoms were always there. I'm part of my routine. I should have known. Like that time I got pulled over for running a spot sign. You know, I talk a lot about dyslexia in my comedy routine.
Yeah.
But officially diagnosed, and then I could put a label on
Mhm.
it,
Mhm.
and then pursue avenues to understand it better. It was,
Yeah. Yeah, and what was that what was that like when you finally got the diagnosis of how did that feel?
it was so much of a relief because for the
Mhm.
first time in my life, I knew it wasn't me.
Mhm.
I knew there was something more to it than just me because it's typical for dyslexic. They get told that they're either unintelligent or unmotivated, and those are both things
Mm.
that lead to shame and things like that. So I was able to put put a label on it and then understand it and research it and discover it and see how it affected my life. Unfortunately, though, it didn't take long. I took on a victim mentality. If
Mm.
only I'd have been diagnosed early. If only I'd have known
Mm.
I was in first or second grade, my
Mm.
whole life would have been different. And that's what
Right.
kind of spiraled me down into some real difficulties in life. But
Right.
I recovered from all that, and now I'm having fun, and I'm
Y
making
yeah.
fun of it with my comedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Real
Yeah,
great journey.
I definitely find that comedy is a great connector, unifier way to get through a difficult time, I think. I mean, it's hard because you sort of have to get through it and then you can poke fun of it after you're
Yeah.
right not in the middle of the trauma, right? Um, but yeah, that's good. And I think, we need to laugh at all of this thing called life, right?
Absolutely.
So, but you did graduate summa cum laude, even though you were dyslexic. How did that come about?
Well, I didn't know I was dyslexic, but I was.
Yeah.
So I graduated high school second in my class,
Mhm.
second from the bottom. And I thought I was destined to be, as my father said, you're never going to amount to anything. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until I was in my 30s. And I just wanted to prove that I wasn't stupid. And so I worked
Mhm.
really hard. I discovered how I learn, my own process of learning. I'm a visual person. I'm an active learner. I learned to figure out what the teachers want and just focus on that because I don't have a lot of time to cover everything. And
Mhm.
so I just worked real hard, focused on it, had established good relationships with whoever the teachers were. They straight knew exactly what they wanted and understood it. And this is a degree in software development as a programmer, which is
Right.
not an easy one to get. But the whole concept of figuring out what they want is exactly what you need to do as a software developer.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what they
Mm-hmm.
want, and then you develop the tools for them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I started getting A's, and I thought, well, I'm going to just keep this thing rolling. And I did, and I graduated summa cum laude.
That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah, that is really great. And then that kicked off your IT career. Is that
Yeah, I was a
yeah.
software engineer for around 10 years,
Uh-huh.
and the dot-com bomb hit, and I could not
Yeah.
find any work. And
Yeah.
I was getting older at that time, 'cause now I'm in my late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I started finding out about age discrimination, although they wrote laws that you can't. But the key was to get in somewhere before you turn 55. Because after
Yeah.
55, it's not likely you're going to get hired, especially
Mm-hmm.
because of age discrimination, because they might be
Mm-hmm.
for them to get rid of
Mm-hmm.
you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so then I shifted to more of a tech support for the University of Colorado at the Chief Medical Center there,
Mm-hmm.
and went in, had a lower position and worked my way up and got into server support, system administrator, and ended up retiring there. I
Wow.
retired in 2020,
Uh,
1 month before COVID hit.
really?
Yeah,
Really?
Valentine's Day of 2020. And then 1 month
Wow.
later, Valentine's hit.
Wow. That was good timing.
Yeah. I had all these plans. I had it all. I'm a planner,
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
strategist, and it all planned out. What I was going to do,
Yeah.
be busy, I had all these activities, this volunteer work, all these things to do, and it all just died. Nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, well, I know that's all of us, right? We we all had
Yeah.
plans. So, that and then so out of high school, you went right to the army, right? Is
Yeah,
that
right in
right?
the military. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then after that back to college or to college.
Yeah. I,
And
I went to a tech school and got a degree in
Mhm.
electronics and worked on mainframe computers for 10 years.
Mhm.
And then
Mm,
that died. And that's when I went in to get my degree in software development.
okay.
You had to reinvent yourself. So I started in my mid 30s, a whole nother career
Yeah.
as a
Right.
software developer. And I went to
Yeah.
school for that, worked really hard. And then I've had a lot of different careers in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And then where did the marijuana addiction come in to all of
Well,
that? How did
it started at a young age, and it's very typical. And this is why I say it's so important for children to be diagnosed early in life,
Mhm.
because in the classroom, they're not going to have success.
Mm,
It's just not part of the formula because it's very academic based, and dyslexics aren't. They have other creative ways that lots of them are very smart in other ways, which are
mhm.
not emphasized in the academic world. So what happens is they start venturing off into other things, some of them very risky activity, things
Mhm.
that they feel like they're accomplishing something. And I did the same thing. I started getting into some trouble. I started getting with the sort of outcast group
Mhm.
kids. And so I
Mhm.
started, which a lot of people did, started drinking and doing drugs about 14 or 15 years old. And I
Mhm.
found it was an environment I fit in very well
Mm.
and could do well at. And so I continued, and I have no problem with drugs. I have no problem with alcohol. It's just marijuana is the only thing.
Mm. Mm.
Uh, and then I went in the military thinking, I'm going to get away from this. I'm going to get a fresh start. And then you discover that the military is just a microcosm of society. It's going to
Right.
have everything else that society has. And there was
Right.
plenty of that there. And so I
Yeah.
got right back into it,
Mhm.
got out, and that's another story that it's a tragic situation in a car accident. And it was pretty
Mm.
bad. And
Mm.
that caused me a lot of issues, health issues, and psychological issues.
Mhm.
And things were spiraling out of control for me. And I went to school in the electronics. So I did well, had a career, moved to Houston, but I knew I needed to get away from that. And I found a group of people, some young Christians a lot of them came out of the drug culture. So I could
Mhm.
fit in really well. And they helped me a lot. I got out very quickly. One day I just decided I'm going to quit. And I did.
Mm.
That's actually very rare. because I
Wow.
had no consequence. I mean, no cravings,
Right.
nothing. It just
Hmm.
ended overnight.
Wow.
And that was great. I ended up meeting my wife, having my kids, back into school for the electronic school, and then
Hmm.
programming. 30 years I went. I raised my kids, had three different careers, and then I drifted back into it after I found out I was dyslexic. And
Oh,
I took
wow.
on that victim mentality.
Hmm.
I started feeling sorry for myself and how life would have been different. And I was in a toxic work environment, empty nested. And then I found out that, marijuana was legalized. What a novelty.
Hmm.
Be able to smoke it for, that's legal. Uh,
Hmm.
and I started dabbling into it, and then it got out of control again. And this time I was determined not to go back to it. So I got involved in some programs, two different programs, one of them specifically for marijuana addiction, the other one specifically for tapping into your higher power. I ended
Hmm.
up taking the 12-step program 4 times. A
Wow.
couple of times as a leader in a group of men, and got it completely under control. I have no interest at all. I have different ways to deal with struggles
Hmm.
and difficulties, which hopefully we can get into some of that too, because that
Yeah.
getting into this industry, as you know, is not easy. It-
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Lots of difficult.
Exactly. There is plenty of mind stuff that happens and struggles, and you're like, yeah, why am I doing this? Before we got started, you had kind of talked about how the role fear played in all of this for you. So, touch on where that has played into this whole journey through your life, and how you've gotten through that.
Yeah, it started very young, and it has to
Mhm.
do with dyslexia, undiagnosed dyslexia.
Mhm.
Uh, just imagine for a moment, Andrea, that you're 6 or 7 years old, first or
Mhm.
second grade, and you realize for the first time that you cannot do what all the other kids can do effortless,
Mhm.
and you
Mhm.
can't even memorize the alphabet.
Hmm.
And I remember that moment, exactly when that moment happened. And it was when I was supposed to be memorizing the alphabet, and I
Mhm.
could not memorize the alphabet. I could see it was across the wall above the chalkboard, and they had all the pictures and all that. I could go through it, but I couldn't memorize it. And everybody else was whizzing through it. And for the first time, I felt isolated from everybody else. And then other situations where I would always go down early in spelling bees, and I would jumble stuff. And when they do out loud reading, all these sort of embarrassing moments that
Mhm.
made me look pretty bad. And so I developed, and I realized this when I went through the programs, I was able to identify specifically exactly what it is. And that's a fear of failure, rejection, and isolation. And I developed all that through elementary school. When I was in
Mhm.
the academic environment, I was afraid to fail. I was
Mhm.
going to be rejected. I was
Right.
afraid to get isolated. So I wouldn't do things because I didn't want to fail. And the default for not doing anything is failure. You have to do something if you want to succeed at it. If you don't, you've pretty much failed. But nobody knows about it and you're going to hide. And so I did a lot of that uh, too. And so this went with me my whole life. Um, it was like a backpack of rocks that I carried everywhere I went. Everything I did, there's always this in the back of my head, this fear of failure, of rejection, of isolation. That leads to a fear of success too, because once you're successful, you have to keep going
Mhm.
and more
Mhm.
going. So it's going to be crippling.
Yeah.
So I identified that, and I've the- then uh, uh, interesting. The COVID hit, and I retired. COVID hits. We're getting towards the end of COVID, and my daughter and son-in-law. It was my son-in-law's idea to give me a commercial acting class. It was a virtual
Mm.
class, one of the top commercial acting schools in LA, and they live
Mhm.
out in LA. And that was great because I'm into this commercial acting, and that's when I bit by the bug that I really wanted to.
Mhm.
And I was able to do some things sort of acting wise that I was amazing myself. But I struggled with memorization, struggled with figuring out what the script should be, because you have to figure a
Mm.
lot of that out on your own.
Right.
And fear of failure was just gripping me through
Mhm.
all. I kept pushing through it. Uh, and then one of the sessions was on improv.
Mhm.
No script. You
Right.
just improvise. And they
Yeah.
bring a special teacher for that who's a big time improviser in LA. And we went through the whole process, and he told me that I had some really great instincts. I had some great responses, and he kind of discouraged virtual improv, that it really needs to be done live. So
Right.
I asked him, "Well, is there any place in Denver?" And he knew right off the top of his head, Rise Comedy, the two guys
Mhm.
that I know them both. They're very good. They'll take good care of. So I started getting involved in Rise Comedy, and he was correct. The two owners there, they're great people, and they were hurting for some staff. So they had
Mhm.
an intern program, and I volunteered for the intern program. And I do lighting and sound at Rise Comedy once a week, usually on
Mhm.
Saturday.
Mhm.
Because of that, the classes are all free. You earn
Yes.
credits towards classes.
Yeah.
I've never had to pay for one class. I've taken 5 improv classes because I take the same one twice. Because my fear was gripping on me. It was hard for me to work through the process of being courageous enough to just go out and start creating a scene.
Yeah.
And so I was still struggling with that. And I thought, well, maybe I should take some acting classes because that will help me understand character development, things like that. So I started taking classes at Denver Center of Performing Arts.
Nice.
And by the way, they have a great scholarship program. All my classes were 50% off.
Nice.
Lifetime scholarship. So if people are concerned about money, there's ways that you can get around the expenses that it costs to do changes in your life.
Right.
And that's where I really flourished as far as being able to do some acting.
Mhm.
Uh, and great teachers there. One, Timothy McCracken, he's an expert at this stuff. He takes people wherever you are, he takes you there and starts moving you up. Uh,
Mhm.
knows how to do that so well. He's so encouraging. I let him know I'm dyslexic. He he thought that was great, uh,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
worked with me, and I learned a bunch of techniques on memorization. And the last technique, I was paired up with this established actor in the area. We did a scene together, and I was telling him about how hard I'm having doing memorization, and he pulls out some flashcards. This guy is an established actor guy. He says, "I use
Mm.
flashcards just like in
Mhm.
school."
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're using flashcards, and that was the final piece that I needed. So the last class I took, the last scene that we did, I was nailing it. And Timothy McCracken, he does notes after each one, and he's giving these people notes, but he's not giving me any notes. And I'm thinking, listen, I paid the same price as everybody else. And then all he did to me, he looked over at me, and says, "The whole scene, you were in the moment." He said, "But keep digging deeper." And that was the last thing he
Yeah.
said. Means I was, my uh, role that I was playing was believable. I was
Mhm.
actually playing the character, and that's what you want to
Yeah.
strive for in acting,
Right.
is in the moment.
Right.
So I knew that I had gotten to where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what your original question was,
Yeah, yeah.
but no,
Yeah, that's good. I think we had talked about fear. There's a lot of fear in just starting all of this,
oh,
putting
there's
yourself
fear in
out
all,
there. Mhm.
and I'm still having the fear in the improv. I'm
Yeah.
overcoming the fear in the acting because I'm
Mhm.
using these techniques, which I figured out are how I can memorize lines, which was to understand the objective of the character,
Mhm.
understand the visualness of the scene, and
Mhm.
I even came up with my own props. They would help
Mhm.
me remember what I'm doing, what the next scene is, what my next lines would be,
Oh,
and
yeah.
they don't fit
Yeah.
with the scene. And the
Yeah.
instructor was pretty amazing. "How did you come up with that idea?" But
Yeah.
wow,
No,
but I was
that's good.
using it to help me to remember my scene,
Right.
my
Right.
next line and stuff like this.
Yeah.
I was By the time I finished the acting, that fear that I had of not being able to memorize lines and being able to understand the scene, I was able to squelch that completely. That I was
Yeah.
ready now to take on a bigger, by eliminating that fear, which is the barrier that was holding me back.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's it, is really about finding what works for you because, we're all different people and, finding that you use the little props to help you along and hadn't
Yeah.
even had never even heard of that before or, even just the flashcards like
I know that's worked for some people who are in my acting class too. They use flashcards a lot. Other people use a different recording method where they're recording themselves and, things like that. It's all about finding the method that works best for us and trying different things and trusting that you have mastered that part of that skill so that you don't have to be afraid of it anymore, right?
Yeah, there's a process that I discovered, uh, and it was understanding this improv stuff. For me, there was fear when I first
Mhm.
went out. I could do the exercises in the class, but when I got on stage in front of a live audience, the
Mhm.
fear would take over,
Yeah.
and I couldn't step out to
Mm.
start a scene or to jump into a scene, or I would
Right.
overanalyze it so because I didn't want to fail, that it would move
Right.
on where I could even say what I had to say. So
Yeah.
there's first one of just being comfortable out there,
Yeah.
where I'm
Yeah.
just and as I'm reaching these stages, the fear is getting less and less. And then the next stage for me was being confident. And then the final stage is trusting yourself to just step out. And so I went back to the improv and I was able to get to the comfort stage where I could come out and interact with the scene and start doing things. Hadn't gotten to the trust.
Mhm.
And that's where stand up came in. And so
Mm.
there was a stand up class that runs there. There's some very good stand up classes. Christy Buchley, she's very
Yeah.
good. So I
She's awesome.
started her class and all this prep stuff that I did that led up to that, uh, I just took off with
Yeah.
this. Uh, you write your own material, so I could easily memorize it. You
Yeah.
deliver your own material. You're the everything. You're the producer,
Yeah.
you're the director, you're the star, you're the writer,
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
everything. No one else to play off of. There's nobody to hide behind on stage. It's just you up
Right.
there. And so
Yeah.
I was real comfortable with some material that I wrote. And so I was able to then start taking the experiences from the acting classes, the spontaneity
Mhm.
from the improv classes, and tie that all into the stand up. Uh, and as I'm doing all this stuff, the fear is just fading away. It's just going away. I had mic fright that was crippling. I couldn't,
Mm.
I'd be in a meeting at work. I'd have to write notes on what I'm going to say,
Oh, wow.
but I would have them. So when it was my turn to speak, I had those with me.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Well, definitely the fear of speaking is huge. A lot of people are really afraid of speaking even in a small meeting. But
yeah.
yeah, then you take it to the whole next level with performing at, Comedy Works in Denver with 250 people or whatever it is. So yeah,
Uh,
so
yeah. And
you
that's,
just started, your stand-up career a couple of years ago then.
no, I actually started it about 8 or 9 months ago.
Oh, wow, wow, wow.
Yeah,
So even
I worked
sooner.
really hard. I have good work ethics. I worked really
Yeah.
hard. The classes have helped a lot. I had
Yeah.
all, I really started, yeah, about 2 years ago when I started improv and acting.
Mhm.
So I
Right.
had all
Okay.
that foundation
Yep.
led to when I started stand up, which last October,
Okay.
I started that. So it is kind of like
Awesome.
I started a couple years ago.
Yeah,
So I
but
did preparation.
that's awesome. Yeah, there's some of the prep work and who knows, like it's always a process, right?
It is a
So
process. It is.
so so tell tell me about like when you were like so how did you finally go in to take the test about being diagnosed with dyslexia? What led to that moment of of testing?
Well, I learned in technology and software development that when you go about something, there's a process. You gather information, you
Mm,
organize it, you analyze it, you come to
mhm,
conclusions, you start taking action. And that works well for my dyslexic mind.
mhm.
And I've been doing that my whole career. Well, I got this young guy who was like a corporate climber kind of guy. Things weren't happening fast enough for him. Everything had to be
Mhm,
fast, 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 fast.
mhm,
So he'd throw me into these positions where he wouldn't let me do that. I felt to start on right away. You know,
mhm,
this is not how you approach things, technology. And it was
mhm.
so stressful that at my age, I was breaking out with acne and it
Uh-huh.
was just tearing me up. And my fears were just so bad. The fear of failure, rejection, isolation. And I worked through all of that. I mean, I did some amazing stuff. I did some upgrade stuff, took the system into the cloud, did all that stuff. Once that was done, an opening opened up in another department. And it ended up being a promotion for me. And
Mhm,
it was less stressful. And the manager there lets you do your own process. They were just interested in what you were going to deliver. So I was able to get into my own element, to do my own stuff. And it ended up, the guy that was there before let a lot of stuff slip. So I had to do a lot of things to get everything back in order. So it took about 2 years. And then I thought, well, I've got everything under control. I can think about what's going on here. So I started researching because I knew something was wrong there, that I had to struggle with this stuff. So I started researching my symptoms, and it kept coming up dyslexia.
Wow.
And there's these sites where they provide training. Well, it's all for children. Everything's for children, nothing for adults. And you take this test, and they evaluate you, no concern, moderately, major concern, extremely concerned, and so every test I took, it was extremely concerned, extremely concerned. So then that pointed me towards dyslexia as some sort of issue. So then I started finding out how to get tested, and there's nothing for adults, students, kids, college kids, K through 12. There's all kinds of resources for it. They can get it for free. But as an adult, it's like $2,000 to $3,000 to get tested.
Wow.
But there are programs. Now, I was trying to understand it. I was contacting psychologists to see if they could help me understand this and the psychological effect it had on me. And there's no money for that either, because the insurance company, it's self-correcting. Dyslexia is self-correcting. Like, what that? No,
You're just going to grow out of it. What?
But I talked to one psychologist. She said, well, you can get tested cheap at universities that are training people to administer the test. So UCD downtown here in Denver and Denver University both do that. UC Denver, I had a 3-month waiting list, and I couldn't wait that long. DU was able to get me in right away. So they go on, they administer the test. It's a grad student that does it. So they administer the test and give you the results, and that's what I found out. And the test starts with an IQ test, and then they do the academics. And at first, the IQ test, and I'm thinking, I'm not dyslexic, because it was too easy for me. And then the academic one was when the shame kicked in. I thought, oh, gosh, there is something wrong here. I mean, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And that's what dyslexia is. It's a gap between your IQ and your academic abilities, because everybody's about the same. When there's that gap, your academic, and then it is below your IQ at a certain amount, then it becomes dyslexia.
I see.
So I'm moderate dyslexic.
Okay. Interesting. Wow. Well, that's great that you were able to get tested much earlier and get tested for a more reasonable amount than $2,000 or $3,000 or whatever that was. That's crazy. That's crazy. So good. Well, yeah, we'll definitely have to link to some of the resources in the show notes with, getting tested and some of the things that you found with that. That would be great to help others, because I know you were talking about the importance of getting tested or diagnosed when you're young on that.
Right. And I would encourage any parent that has a child that's struggling academically to get them tested. And it's free through the school system. They'll pay for it.
Right.
They're not always cooperative. So you have to really advocate for your children, and you have to be a strong advocate, because of added resources, added things that they have to do outside of their regular classroom stuff.
Right.
And not every school is set up to do that.
Yeah.
It has a right to the American with Disability Act, ADA Act, but they need a strong parent to advocate for them. It usually is mom that does.
Yep. So, well, that's great that you finally got the diagnosis. I wonder how much, do you feel like your dyslexia contributed to your comedy and your outlook later in life, or was that just maybe unrelated? I don't know.
Well, I think it does. Dyslexics, one of the things about dyslexia is they tend to think outside the box. Part of it is learned behavior, because you can't do well in school if you follow the academic rules.
Yeah.
You have to think of other ways to do that. So you naturally become someone who is going to think outside the box. You have to be successful.
Yeah.
For me, in the IQ test, I rated like in the 92nd percentile in 4 categories. All of those had to do with abstract reasoning. Basically problem solving and thinking outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah.
that's what I try to put into my comedy is looking at things
Yeah.
angle, which a lot of comedians do.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly,
find something
exactly.
different about it, something
Yep,
unusual about it,
yep, for
something
sure,
hard about it.
for
I think
sure.
it's I think that some of the best comedians were dyslexic. Tim Conway was dyslexic.
Oh,
Robin
I didn't
Williams
know.
was dyslexic. Jim Carrey is dyslexic. Uh,
Yeah,
and I'm sure the list goes on. When
yeah,
I
I
when I
did.
joke about dyslexia and I'm at an open mic, I say, "Is anybody dyslexic in here?" And if no one raises their hand, I say, "Come on, a room full of comics and none of you are dyslexic? Come on." It's a comedy thing.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, this has been so much fun getting to hear your story, and I'm sure that hopefully it's helping someone out there who may not even know that they or their child are struggling with potential dyslexia. So that's great. And as always, I like to kind of close out our session here with one of your favorite or two, one or two of your favorite quotes or inspirational sayings, because I'm a little bit of a quote junkie. So I'd love to hear what you find inspirational, what keeps you going.
Well, I'm a bit of a quote junkie myself. I all kinds of quotes because they're very powerful. They're a short
Yeah.
little thing, have lots of power to them and lots of
Yep.
wisdom. I love quotes. So I have lots of different quotes. But I've thought about two of the ones that I use a lot in my life. One is to help me when I'm struggling, and the other one is to help me to be a better person. And the one that helped when I was struggling, I got it from one of my recovery programs about higher power. It's something I got
Mhm.
from higher power. And that is, and my higher power is a Christian higher. So it's in Hebrews 12:2. And I did a bunch of research on it 'cause I'm kind of a geek. And I looked up the Strong's Concordance and what the words mean in Strong's
Mhm.
Concordance. So I was able to come up with a sort of a definition that is very, very powerful. It has to do, well, I'll just say it to you. It's Hebrews 12:2. And this is not the full verse, but it's part of it. It says, "For the joy destined him, Christ bravely and calmly endured the cross, thinking nothing of the shame that was put upon him." And if you think about the story that went on
Mhm.
for what Christ accomplished and what he did, what he had to go through, and he didn't want to do it either,
Mhm.
uh, because it's going to be a pretty tough
Mhm.
struggle. Yeah, tougher than anything I will ever experience.
Mhm.
So I look at that. The first of all, people will always question you. They'll always maybe put you down, or they say you're not funny enough. Or you go to an open mic and you bomb, people, nobody laugh, or you do a show and it bombs.
Yeah.
You just got to think nothing of that stuff.
Yeah.
Nothing of the shame. And then when you run into struggles, you got to approach it bravely and calmly. Don't let it fluster you. Like for me, I have to not allow this fear of failure, rejection, isolation to have any influence at all. And if I'm brave and calm about whatever the struggle is, that fear has no room.
Mhm.
And then the end result is there's great joy afterwards,
Mm.
which joy comes from a hormone called dopamine,
Mhm.
which your body naturally secretes. And that's what
Mhm.
everybody wants when they do drugs. It's the dopamine that gets
Yeah.
secreted in the body. Is what the drugs does for them. But they don't do anything to earn it because dopamine is something you get when you accomplish something very difficult.
Mm.
An athlete who wins the Super Bowl, that dopamine
Mhm.
at its highest level, and it's all natural. And so that joy that you can experience after you work through the difficulty, you're
Mhm.
calm and don't let anybody uh, uh, negatively influence what you're trying to do.
Mhm.
The second one I like is it's a quote. A lot of people have said it, but I first heard it with Steve Harvey.
Mhm.
That's one accomplished guy. I mean, he
Mhm.
is
It's
a lot,
amazing.
and he's very humble about it too, and that's what I like about it. He's very humble. He's very vulnerable, very transparent about everything. He's like the real deal type of a guy. And he says, "I'm just trying to be the best version of myself I can be." And that I think is all you can do. Just be the
Mhm.
best version of yourself that you
Mhm.
can be. And then comedy is really big because you can't be another comedian. You may pick up some of their style, a little bit of their technique, but you can never be some other comedian. You have to be yourself. And that's what
Mhm.
we love to see is the authenticity, the vulnerability of you just being yourself, the genuineness. So if you get best version of yourself, that's what's going to help you. And I had struggled with persona because I'm kind of new. There's what's my persona? What's my persona? Hey, kids, persona. And nobody helps you because that's something you find out on your own.
Yeah.
I found just be the best version of myself. That's what we call persona. Maybe I take it up or not, you know?
Yep, exactly. Just be you. And I definitely, it's definitely how I resonate with some comedians. You kind of get a vibe when you're like, I think the person on the stage is going to be the same person that I would meet off the stage. And I always like that because I always feel like it's a great way to connect to someone when you can have them share their real self. So yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Steve, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you for all of your thoughts and your ideas around overcoming fear and getting through your dyslexia diagnosis later in life. And I'm just wish you all the best for your acting and comedy and grandpaing and whatever. Thanks so much.
There's so much life to live, no matter what age you are.
That's right. Hope that was helpful, and make sure you grab the free guide, Top Tools for Late Starters, on the website at latestartersclub.com. And let's turn dreaming into doing.